So let's take a look at what it is required to add a slope to one of the message or command bars. And all of that functionality is inside the app layout section. We see it down here, bar edge slope. And by default it's at 90 degrees, which is the standard straight cut through the key guard. Let's begin by adding some height to the upper message bar and then exposing it. We'll also add a little bit of height, 6 millimeters or so, to the upper command bar. And then this is basically what the standard key guard looks like. It has an opening for the message bar, but the edges are straight up and down, 90 degrees. And at an angle, it's a little hard to see down into that space. You have to kind of get right on top of it to look down in. On the other hand, if I take this bar edge slope option here, change it to 45 degrees. What it did was open up visual lane into the bar. It didn't change the size of the opening, so at the bottom here it's still 10 millimeters across. And if I look at it from the underside, this is 10 millimeters and this part here is still 6 millimeters. It just chopped off the edge of that command bar cover, angled it right through it, and created some additional access. The outer edges of the message bar are still vertical, and there's no way to change those, because doing so can cause some problems for these outer borders. In some cases there are mounting options that involve these outer borders, like the clip-on straps. In other cases, if you were to cut this part off in order to fit the key guard in a case, you would also be causing some issues about the integrity of these sides. So the only slopes that are available are for these inside edges of the bars. So we can see the same thing if we looked at, for example, let's cover up the upper message bar and let's display the lower message bar instead. So we see that displayed, and if I angle this up, maybe a little hard to see, it looks just dark here, but this inside edge is sloped at a 45 degree. If I display both, by the way, both the upper and lower bars, both the upper message bar and the upper command bar, everything just appears to be a 90 degree angle, because the only thing that is sloped is between the two. We see the same behavior on the lower message bar, lower command bar. We'll take a look at those momentarily. So we preserve the integrity of the grid itself by not sloping into this upper rail. We cut it in half, but it still has integrity. It's still a solid rail by keeping it at 90 degrees. And just to show you what it would look like, and you certainly can have this happen to you, is if, for example, I said that we are not going to display the upper command bar and its height is 0. Then what happens is the program still attempts to give you a 45 degree angle, but because there is no width, no height for this upper menu bar, it is trying to cut right into the rail, the upper rail of the grid, and actually cuts in here to some of the vertical rails, not just the horizontal rail at the top. So you get, the result here is you end up with something that is very thin and a little more fragile as a result. So that's why it's important that you always have some height assigned to the adjacent bar. So I've got the message bar here that's displayed and has a slope. I don't want to eat into the grid with my cut, my 45-degree cut, so I want to make sure I have some space allocated to the upper command bar. Case, I think six millimeters was plenty. The more, the shallower the slope, the more you're going to find that you need to have set aside here, or you're going to end up cutting into something. So if I set this at 30 degrees, actually I'm still doing pretty well here. I think it's still coming to just about the center of this horizontal rail. Horizontal if I hold the key guard this way. But just to show you how one could eat into the sides of the key guard, the upper message bar slopes this direction, and the lower message bar slopes in the other direction. So let's just pretend that I had an upper message bar that is not displayed, but is also of 0 width, or 0 height, and I'm going to display the lower, or the upper command bar, and it's only 6 millimeters in height, which really isn't the thing that has the impact. But you'll see, because it's got a 30-degree slope, it cuts into this upper border of the key guard. And if you get it up close, you'll see that it actually cuts the edge down. It's a little hard to see here, but getting close. Actually makes a notch downward. Probably still not a terrible problem, but if this were also in a case, this would all be trimmed away, and you'd have this very thin little strip of key guard edge out here. So always make sure that there is something adjacent to, some other bar that you've allocated space to, that is adjacent to the bar you're exposing if you're going to change the slope away from 90. As long as the slope is 90, well, then there's no issue. I can make this bar as wide as I want, and it will just shrink the grid and won't cut into the outer border of the key guard.